Hey, it's attorney Mark Blane, practicing law here in San Diego, California, and I'm here to talk to you about the 3 myths surrounding a traffic collision report in your personal injury case. And this is real insightful because I get these questions all the time, and so I turned them into my 3 myths about the report. Myth number 1 is the police officer can testify at trial about the causation of the event or injury or collision. And that's false. In California, the police officer cannot testify as to causation of the events that led to the collision or injury. The only exception to that is if the police officer actually witnesses your collision, injury, whether it's from a car crash, truck crash, bicycle, pedestrian injury. That's the only exception, which is extremely rare. I've only had a few cases in the last 20 years that the police officer actually witnessed the collision. So 9 times out of 10, the officer cannot give his own personal opinion, even though he was at the scene of the collision right after it happened, where everything was fresh in everybody's mind. He cannot give his own opinion as to causation. Now, what you do at trial is you ask the officer questions about his report, the statements that he gathered at the scene, the collision debris field that he documented. Any of those statements from other parties, witnesses, he can reflect upon at trial. He can give his own summation as to what he remembered someone said to him, as long as he's reviewing his notes. So that's myth number 1, just debunked out of the box, okay? So let's move on to myth number 2. Myth number 2 is if the police officer writes down that you're at fault in his police report, that means you're at fault no matter what. Well, using the same logic as myth number 1, unless the police officer witnessed the collision or event, just because he says you're at fault does not mean you're 100% at fault. It could mean that you're 0% at fault and he got it wrong. The witness statements were incorrect, which led him to conclude in the report, in his writing, that you were at fault. It could also mean that you're 25% at fault, 50% at fault, some apportionment of fault, which is something that needs to be investigated further. So just because a police officer writes down that you're at fault for an injury from a car crash, pedestrian, or whatever it is, doesn't mean you're 100% at fault. So keep that in mind. That's myth number 2. Myth number 3 is you need to have a police report in every injury case in order to have a strong personal injury case. And that's false as well. Not every case is going to have a police report. Sometimes the police are busy. A lot of times the police don't come out because they figure that no one's seriously injured, meaning that there's no ambulance ride to ER. But it certainly doesn't mean that no one's injured. A lot of times with soft tissue injuries, you don't start feeling the complaints until a few hours later or even the next day. So just because you don't have a police report does not mean that you have no case in California. And of course, there's a lot of other evidences that we can take into consideration in order to prove up your case. For example, your own testimony of what you remember happening, the property damage to both vehicles, whatever the other party's saying, things like that, your medical care, the objective evidence of what you went through medically because of someone who made a decision to cause an injury. So just because you don't have a police report does not mean that you do not have a case in California. So keep that in mind. So those are the 3 myths that I want to talk to you about. And if you have any other questions, you can always get in touch with me. I answer questions like this all the time. Be sure to grab your free ebook from my website. I'm sure I've got an ebook for your particular injury and your particular legal questions, so you can get more information in order to make an informed decision on what you want to do next in your California personal injury case. With that said, have a great day and stay strong.